Hey, hey, hey. Yes, it's live, it's live. Right. Okay. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Unskippable podcast. We're doing second episode today with Kimmo here. We're looking at MVVM again. We did a similar thing last week with Mike. So thanks to Mike. And welcome, Kimmo. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, sure, yeah. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, I'm Kimmo. I'm an indie developer, and I've been working in games for a while in all kinds of roles. I've been a programmer for most of my career. I've also been a producer for a few years, and way back in history, I've done things like character animation, like really far into history. And these days, I'm fully indie, which means doing anything that needs to be done. That means implementing any game features, building UIs, sometimes sound design, art, the whole thing. And yeah, I've been working with Ren for a few years at Offroad Industries um,
I've got the
in the
jumper on right now.
past.
I got the jumper on. Yeah. Yeah. I thought it's like a little commemorative. My off-world hoodie. Yeah, we worked together, right? So that was back on Starship Troopers Extermination. I
Yep.
was originally lead design and then moved over to Principal Tech, and together we did a lot of tickets. We did a lot of building a game.
Did a lot-
Uh,
Yeah, we also did a game. We also made a game, but we
we
also
did.
did a lot of Jira tickets.
Oh,
So
yeah. No, I still got your 3D printed little gun you gave me on release day.
yeah.
Yeah. The Starship Troopers rifle, man. That was so cool. I
Yeah,
don't know, it's on
printed a little
my
Marita.
somewhere around.
Yeah,
There it is. It's right there. Ah, yeah. Look at this, guys. This little 3D printed. It's terrible resolution here. But anyway, yeah, super cool little thing. Uh,
yeah, that was when we launched the game into early access. I think
yeah, January,
that's
February,
when we
January,
celebrated
February,
it.
March, April, May. Yeah, 17th of May, 2023. Gonna
Yeah,
put that on
can't
my
put it
desk.
in there
Gonna
too.
put that on my desk for the remainder of the call. Okay, cool. Yeah,
Yes.
no, it was good times. It was good times. And I remember when I was working there, I was doing a lot of UI, and you and others programmers on the team as well were like, well, what are the best ways we can do this? And at the time, MVVM wasn't a thing. Common UI wasn't a thing. We were building so much of it from scratch. Nowadays, we're blessed with the improvements that Unreal has given us, and we actually worked on this a little bit as well together here. Like
Yeah,
very briefly, like I did a little bit of like gameplay tech, but then I haven't touched this in a long time. I'd love to see where you're at with it. Um, yeah, let's take
yeah.
a
So
look.
I'm probably not gonna talk about the game too much since I haven't really. These days I work on exfil full
Oh
time, and
yeah.
it's kind of it's really eaten my that's my primary job is working on exfil, and Ren, you also probably mentioned exfil a couple times on the
Heads up,
stream since
operators.
you also
Yeah.
worked
Field
in the game in
reports are
the
back,
past.
and exfil
We're working together, and it's really eaten most of my time. That's the indie life. So I haven't really had too much time to put into this side project in the past year. But so this was kind of like a zombie themed action survival game. Where you play as a soldier. Escorting this APC through city, various maps. I can actually show a little bit of gameplay. I haven't really prepared for this part, but I can at least show what it looks like. So I can talk about why I was then working on some inventory UI for the past little while.
This thing's cool.
Um,
What is this in the middle here?
oh, the badge. That's
Yeah.
the game is called Z-Force 95 because it's like a kind of like a retro style, like a pseudo retro zombie shooter. So I made a little like a spinning badge in Blender to be like the loading screen.
Is it like an
But so
MP4?
yeah, it's a video clip. By the way, the advantage of using like I used Pink Video for that, and the advantage of using that was that like it plays without hitching when you're loading, so it was a good way to do the loading screen.
I think
Um,
video. Yeah. Okay.
yeah. Um, so anyway, so the game itself that we're looking at here is kind of like a fairly easily understandable game where you're in a city, you get hundreds, there's like 1,000 zombies wandering around. They're not too dangerous on their own. But once you start making noise and that's compiling some shaders there because I haven't launched it in a while, so you see the things. Then if you make noise, the zombies start swarming you, and you can't fight them all, so it's better to run. And you need to do some objectives here, rescue survivors. I have some friendly soldiers that you can find and kill. And then the idea is that also that you bring loot, some supplies like ammunition, back to your convoy, and then progress through the missions like that. So, so I did not have like a loot. A game like this really benefits from having like a loot screen. If you played games like Zomboid or things like, which are of course way more complicated. Zomboid is a really good game, so this definitely has some inspiration. Oh, here they come. So where you have like a loot screen where you pick various things from a container, put them in your inventory, and so on. So game like this also needs something like this, even when it's a little bit simpler or more fast paced.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I wanted to build and so the game already had an inventory that ran built, for guns and weapons, really, equipment. But then I also wanted to start making like an inventory plugin for kind of like a generic inventory plugin that could be used in multiple types of games. Where you want to like grab things from a container, assign them into slots, and things like that. And
Saved there and stuff as well, I imagine.
yeah, and networked as well. So that's really crucial that it works in a network environment as well. And now I don't think it's necessarily possible to do like an inventory plugin that works for every single type of game. This stuff that I've been building works for games like RPG style, like Baldur's Gate, where you have like you have your inventory, you have your slots. Works for something like that quite well. And also for this. So that's kind of the background, like what like, so I started to build that inventory code plugin, and then of course need the UI for that. And I've been doing the UI tests on top of this game. So I've been kind of building the UI and the plugin as we go. So I'll just show the state right here. The random names are just like we're with Private Pigs Legio. Let's actually generate a new guy. Raider Chipley. That sounds good, right?
Yeah. Private Raider Chipley. Nice.
Yeah, Private Raider Chipley. So if I, in this gray box test level, I walk to the container and use it, it will bring up the, the inventory screen. And so on this
is cool.
So on this screen, and some of the stuff here is kind of just like, so this is all built using MVVM, and some of the stuff here is I would say like real, and some is like mock data. I can talk about that as well. But like the inventory, which is the the main point of this isn't just like fake inventory. There's still some things that I haven't done, but so what we have is on the right here, we have the the container that you're currently investigating, and then you have your character, you have your equipment slots, you got your gear slots, head, face, body, arm, legs, backpack for inventory. I went with this kind of a small style. My inspiration here, by the way, was from an older strategy game called Jagged Alliance, and where they had this kind of like a backpack system with like a small slots and large slots. But of course,
cool.
you could do something that's like just like a list, or something something Tarkov-like or things like that. So it doesn't have to be like this, of course. So the slots are completely configurable. But so here I can drag stuff from the container into my backpack. Get those items from there. Take off my FOMAS rifle, replace it with this. Replace it with the M16. Can take away my cool shades and put on the gas mask. The character preview doesn't update, but it's still like wanted to do a little 3D character there.
Yeah,
and so on and so on. And some of the stuff here is like, for example, this weight that's here, this update. So if I move my rifle back to the container, it drops. The weight drops to 8, and now it goes back to 11. So, in a game like this, you can't have infinite inventory space. So you have to make some choices what you carry. And if you carry too much, then, you'll be moving slower and the zombies will get you. So
Yeah, yeah,
that's the kind of stuff we're dealing with. Otherwise on the screen, so I implemented like you can sort. Just quickly did this kind of sorting. It sorts them by weight. And I also implemented like just for them, mostly because as an example for the MVVM stuff, I implemented like a tab switching here. I didn't really put anything in the mission tab, but just did this as an example. Um, Speaking of those tabs, by the way, I know you've done 2 streams on this subject already, right? MVVM, right?
yeah. The refreshers.
Yeah, so you went through went through Epic's examples, and like this tab thing, for example, is exactly what they were doing in those examples, where they actually use the view model to like, highlight, determine like what's the current selection there is. So I'm really trying to use MVVM here for like as much as possible.
I find it
So
interesting because
yeah,
typically we would just be like, let's make a tab list, maybe use the common tab like feature that is one of the panels you can use and insert like list view like category buttons in there, and then switch and just use the index of the selected to
hmm
switch a switcher. That is like a very straightforward method. And so, how do you feel about and why do you think maybe MVVM is good for doing that tab select versus just doing the typical like tab list and direct widget switcher update?
yes. So when I saw that in what Epic was doing this, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So it kind of uses the view model as kind of like an event, kind of like as like an event notify. And I would say that like it's a kind of a cool way to do it. It will remember the state there, and if you have any other screens here that also would need to like or like a, let's say, not screens but like labels that would need to reflect that current selection, you could also easily update those through that. But I wouldn't actually say that this is it's the tab specifically is a superior way in any way.
Yeah.
So it's I'm a little bit
Does
on
it
the fence
save?
there if
Does it
that
save
was
on
a
blueprint code? That's my main
yeah.
question, I guess, because it does, right? Because you've got the events
Oh
now
yeah,
handled
yeah,
in the VM, rather than
yeah,
having to write the blueprint code yourself and handle that graph.
yeah,
I quite like that. I think is a great reason to be like, you know what, if you want less noodles, less blueprint noodles, then you can do MVVM based navigation straight in the designer view, and it's very designer friendly and it's very easily readable from a programmer as well. The other thing I like about it, and hopefully Epic get around to it, I noticed it was mentioned. I always like to bring this up because I'm hoping, so we'll get
yeah,
blessed with the replay system of MVVM because like it's all state based, right? So and it's just data tracking. So if you're saving that along the way, you could actually watch someone navigate an entire UI and see when they got stuck for like UI UX research um, and bug finding, right? Like reproduction steps on bugs. You'd be like, oh yeah, just give me your MVVM like state list and I'll just watch what you did. So
yeah.
doing everything for your MVVM in this way could be really beneficial in the future.
Yeah, that's good for testing. Like in other words, like so the tab example is something that I would chalk up as like that's kind of cool. You don't necessarily have to do it that way. Otherwise, the MVVM concept in Unreal specific like is I'm totally on board with that. Like there's a lot of sense in like in a way that it helps you separate the UI code from the game code. You can be working on the layout even when I think it's especially good in like in a project where you might have a separate like a UX designer doing some layouts and then a you know another developer building up let's say the inventory code here. So in a situation like that, it can really help to get the layout going in time without having to worry too much where the data is coming from at that time.
Yeah,
But
you can stub
even
it in
even
early.
in like yeah, but even in like a single day project like this one, I now do like all of my new UIs with MVVM simply because I just find it simpler to kind of kind of like keep the UI blueprint clean. It doesn't have to hook into the game code directly, and if something changes in the game, the UI doesn't really have to care about it too much. So I like that separation of concerns quite a bit. So even when I was developing this inventory stuff, I was still developing the plugin as well. So it wasn't really ready to go at that point. So I was kind of doing them side by side. So it was kind of nice to like, it, like I built these layouts pretty early and then hooked up the view models pretty early. But as I was changing things in the inventory code, I didn't really have to touch the widgets that much, which was really nice, like a benefit in there. So like it kept those two things like separated as they're kind of meant to be. So I quite like that aspect. But I'm not gonna say that like you should use this on absolutely everything. Because like if you have something simple, let's say, and you just want to do, especially if you haven't used MVVM before, or haven't built tons of Unreal UIs, and you're doing like your first projects and whatnot, you don't necessarily have to dive into this one. Like if you need to do something simple on the screen, just do the simple thing. Like do whatever works for you.
Mhm.
Um, but I would say that like for myself, it's like the MVVM system in Unreal is pretty quite simple. So I do now even like simple UIs with it. It doesn't feel like it's putting like too much overhead into what I'm doing. There are some cases here where I was like second guessing myself. Is like, is this really worth it? And that's, I would say, it depends a lot in like, do you already have a game in place with UI and UI code? So porting something existing that already works and then making that work with MVVM may not, like I don't think it's necessarily valuable to do it for the sake of just cleanliness or whatever. So for example, these character stats here was actually kind of case where I was like, I was, I built this little widget for the key stats: health, armor, stamina, weight. Um, but the game already had, for example, you know, HUDs and like HUD widgets for health and ammo, player name on screen and stuff like that. And at some point, I was like, okay, I'll just hook this up to MVVM as well. It's going to be really, really convenient if I can read all of those from the same place. But then I was also kind of got the feeling that like, you know, this already works. I don't necessarily need to port everything over for that. So
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say there is that like you don't need to do something for the sake of it being there. You can also do there are cases when it's like you know you don't necessarily need to go into that. Um, just to port something over for a little bit of improvement.
I was
But
actually
again, if
thinking
you are
recently. Oh yeah.
yeah yeah no go
I was going to say, like, recently I was thinking of going into the squad modding SDK and seeing if I could MVVM up their system and redo their like gameplay HUD through MVVM as like a stream fun thing. Just because I'm familiar with the mod SDK, I'm familiar with where all the data comes from, and then I'm just saying like I'm going to make an intermediary layer that stores all this data and then draws it.
mm,
And that to me was like a really interesting one because it would clean up all of these blueprint graphs and dependencies in particular. Because I remember working on that UI, I built a lot of it, and there was definitely some some noodly dependencies in there that could be cleaned up quite well with MVVM. That makes it easier to read in the long term. If you were to invest in it on a project of that scale, then there's those minor, yeah, well, there's those long term, the more long term benefits I think are really cool in terms of like readability, especially like division of responsibility, so a programmer can come in. What I really liked that you mentioned that I found really nice about MVVM is that you kind of fire and forget on the UI front. Once you've got your layout sorted and your hooks to your bindings done in your VM, now you're just moving forward with code work. And so it's like I almost feel that fire and forget is really healthy, uh, like workflow, especially either as an indie or as a large team. I get to go in and build that UI once, and as long as it's representing in the correct way and it's got the behaviors that I want, animations, etc., that come from whatever bindings and events, then then that job is ideally done until content moves around and things need to be like updated. But now it's just like programming engineering and like clean up and you can
Yeah,
optimize through that and stuff.
yeah.
I
So
really
so
like
you,
it.
you can be building, layouts kind of as the game is getting built, or you can do it at, do them like layout first and then data, or you can do the data first
Yeah,
and then somebody makes a prettier UI. So it's a I think it's a pretty nice way to like have that separation without having to then go and like dive deep in it, especially if your like widget hierarchies are very nested. It helps to like keep those deeper widgets free from game code dependencies. Um, and it save and the code can be cleaner as well because it does save you from a lot of event bindings. If you
yeah, right.
bind it delegates in your blueprints. So I'm finding that like I do very little of those with these update with these changes.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Um,
no more dispatchers everywhere.
yeah, much fewer dispatchers for sure. And of course, like this replaces the binding system that Unreal UMG has had for ages, right? And so like in that front, it's kind of a bindings 2.0. I don't know if you talked about that too much, like what the difference with the old binding system and then this system is. Did you go
That,
into that?
that, yeah, I've spoke about it a little bit on stream. It's basically that, just to recap my memory as well. The old bindings would be on tick, right?
Yeah, yeah, they check every time if there's some changes need to be applied, and so there's a performance implication there.
Big one.
Um,
Yeah.
and then I guess another thing about the binding is that like you can't really find references through so you can't really find references if something is bound to something that easily. That's something I didn't really think about before, but I guess that's another like possible downside. But the performance I think is the biggest thing because these are fully event based. That in the sense that like they don't send the view models send an event and then the UI updates. You can of course turn on the update every tick as well if you need it for some reason. We can talk about these as well, like what makes sense. But mostly I would say that just keep it on auto there.
I found
Um,
something in the stream once. Maybe you could might be able to try it in your graph, but basically the field notify
yeah.
tick box, like similar to the exposed variable tick
Mhm.
box, like the bell icon in the blueprint graph. Once you've clicked
You mean
that,
these?
yeah, once you've clicked that, and you can click it in here, and then there's like a, I don't know exactly how you do it, I haven't done it myself, but like you could just bind to field notify having happened in a blueprint graph. So like instead of writing dispatchers now, you just make your properties, do the field notify. You don't have to use MVVM to trigger off them. Like you can, if you've got a reference to the class, you can then call like it must be a static function or something that's available everywhere. That's like essentially a dispatched bind to this
Yeah,
having changed. Then you can pick the property or something like that.
yeah, I also came across that. I thought it was like, I was like, interesting, because I saw it here as well, and you can, um, well, how is it listed for? Field notify. So add field value change delegate, so you can
Yeah,
listen
that,
to
yeah,
listen to
yeah.
this, and pick your if I were to, like, for example, just pick like a boolean there and make that a field notify. Um,
When it's above,
compile
yeah.
that, I should be able to bind to new var like this. So this is also kind of interesting that you can do this. I haven't used this at all, so I'm not sure like what like Epic's intention here is. I know you can use the view models for like two-way it doesn't have to be just one way. You can also put data into the view models from the UI. Like if you have like an edit box, because you have this one-way bindings that you use most, but you can also do two-way, and you can do one-way to view model. So you can actually push values into the view model. And my understanding is that that would be for like input fields and things like that. But I haven't
Yeah,
used
yeah.
that a single time here because I don't really have any text fields that need to be touched. So I can't really say too much about that. Um,
It
but
makes sense. It makes
it,
sense though. Yeah, it's like say you're customizing a character on one screen and you want a one way to a view model that's then going to replicate your hat selection. That might be potentially.
yeah, that could be one way, or like you have a name entry screen for the player. You're gonna player
Yeah,
types in the name, and then that gets put into the player view model. So
yeah,
that kind of stuff. So there's definitely a few things that like like the presence of the field notifiers in the widget blueprint is something that's like, oh, that's interesting, but I haven't really dived into it, dived into it too much. But yes, they can be bound in. Oh, I deleted it already, so let's just put the new boolean back here. Test pool, and if that changes, so then we have set with broadcast. So when you call it like that, it's gonna get broadcast to whatever is binding to it. And if we had something that was binding to it, we could react to it in the same way. So you definitely could use it outside those view model objects as well in here. But I
I
haven't
was
really
thinking of it. I was
done
thinking of it
much.
from a gameplay coding perspective because oftentimes, I'm writing components that have dispatchers that something has changed, and I'm not using C++, and I'm writing all these dispatchers myself in the event delegates, blueprint list. And now, um, at a simple level at least, I can do some of these things. What the only limitation compared to like, obviously doing your own delegates are you can't put any output like more outputs in there that you would not
Mm,
might normally have like on some invent for me when I write component inventories I'm like on item changed and this is the inventory that happened from in the event that you're binding to like 5 inventories events changing to draw like a team UI, then we want to know which one it came from. With that if field notifier right now, it wouldn't solve that problem for me. But if you've got the view models updating, then you just read the 5 view models now instead. So
yeah, yeah, you certainly could. That definitely is something that, like, I need to like use more, see if I get a use case for it. So far I haven't really come across. I already in like in this code base I have like
there's a
message
list of
system from
yeah,
Epic that's like a global message bus. So I
yeah,
use that to send like global messages that like multiple things might need to be binding into. But actually I
yeah,
noticed that I used to have a lot more of this, by the way, it's a game messaging subsystem from Epic. It's
yeah.
comes from Lyra, and it's used in some other of the samples as well. Um, but so I've been using a lot of this in my code in the past, and I noticed that like after I started using the MVVM bindings, I was actually removing a lot of these because a lot of these were like a bit like the tab selection thing, kind of like a global-ish notify thing that comes from some other UI, and I was having a lot of these global messages here. So I've been replacing a lot of those. So it's been saving me from using those too much. But I still use these, the game, the broadcast broadcast
Yeah.
message, using gameplay tag as the channel and then putting whatever I need as the payload. So this kind of gets me around the, issues with like delegates of like single values because I can just put whatever struct I need in there, those.
Gameplay
So I
tags come
use,
up a lot. I've noticed, like in this system, gameplay tags are used again. I've seen it in so many places that it's uh, it's a very prolific system nowadays.
they're just universally useful. And
Yeah,
I
right.
endless pain for me, like thinking like where do I put my tags? Just like the paralysis of like naming your
Yeah.
or like organizing your tags properly. I don't know if you
Yeah, it's
get that
the same. It's
much.
the same with like organizing content, naming content, coming up with
Yeah.
conventions. Like you want to have a standard convention, and then what I found, I don't, I haven't used it too much. Gameplay based system, but like aside, like I didn't ever have to refactor my tags, but I always worried, and I think that's where the analysis paralysis comes from. Is if I need to change these essentially abstract enumerated tags at some point in structure, like is it going to ruin my game? Am I going to have to go through every class and redefine everything because it's lost the hierarchy of where it came from? So I definitely have the same paralysis of like how am I going to lay these out and decide early?
Yeah, I think that's just part of the
Yeah, right.
work. Yeah. Luckily, like with tags, of course, there's, if you do rename something, there's a redirector in the tag, so
Yes.
you're not really breaking things too much. But even knowing that, I still agonize over the naming of things
Yeah.
um, with this. Um, However, when it comes to view models, so you might you might have a bit of like a thinking is like, where do I put my VMs, right? You probably came across that. Like, I'm actually going to ask you, like, what do you think? Like, where do you um, think is the right place to put view models? Where do you store them?
There's two ways I would look at it, and then one way I would say it's nice to do something similar to what you've got here and what was in the Epic example, where my view models are all sort of in one nice location that as a developer I can go in and just see what view models I have available and maybe where their reference chains are and how they're being accessed. It becomes this very holistic way of looking into sort of how all the data is managed. And then the other way is I often like to keep my hierarchies of content quite horizontal. Um,
Mm,
Maybe I'm wrong there, maybe it's vertical, but if I've got an inventory system, I want the inventory component, the inventory UI, textures, etc., like held in their folder, and therefore the VM would be alongside potentially the UI. I think I lean more towards having the VMs in their own folder, like you have there. When we think of like doing bundles and updating Steam or a platform, and all that's changed is maybe some VM information, possibly. Well, you would also have the UI that's associated to it, right? Because that's why you're updating the VM. So under that context of bundling and like updating like sections of the game, then I'd want to put the VMs with the content it's relevant to. Um, Problem, I suppose, is that a VM is so useful that it might be used in several places across the game, especially if it's just like generic player data information stuff. Yeah, it's a difficult choice, right? I think after looking at those two options, I'd probably want to put it in the bundle with the widgets that it's associated to. Um, the VM bundle itself is going to be tiny, so like right, because it's just like little data packets. The size
yeah.
of it is going to be tiny, so the benefit of being able to see all the VMs in one place maybe outweighs like having it in the same bundle as the things it's being used by to try and keep things like nicely managed. So I would do this. I would have all my view models in a folder that's easily visible, readable for designers to come in and say, what have we got available? Um, I'm pretty sure though when you hit add VM anyway in a widget, it gives you all of them. Um, And then yeah, my biggest problem is coming up with how I'm gonna resolve them. Am I gonna use a global collection or not? Some people are really against global collection, and I'm like, I get it for certain use cases. It's like I need a VM that is specific to say a character, this character, that character, the other character, and I'm gonna resolve it in that fashion. But for these global things like game state,
Mm,
um, I would, global collection for me, it's like a really smart way. If it's a singleton, like I'm going to put that VM in that global collection because essentially it's just a hashed location of that VM. We're just accessing it nicely without too much pain.
yeah.
Yeah, you've got it open here.
So yeah. So I guess on topic of the resolvers, so I can actually go to each of these and like say what I think is good for each. So like so manual, that's the simplest one and probably the um it's this actually the most common one for me that I use. I think is that you're in charge of setting up that VM manually and telling the widget that here's a VM. So it's pretty simple. Create instance, the VM instance gets created automatically with your widget, and that I think is it's a bit specific for a specific case. So I think that's suitable for when you have lots of items, like list items, for example, where there's a kind of a clear one-to-one mapping with them. That there's one list item, like let's say like a list of players in a player list or
Yeah.
something else. So that's where I would use the create instance. I haven't actually used it too much here.
Yeah, I
Um,
haven't tried it, and I was always wondering how does it get its data? Because manual, I can create the VM and then pump the data in or
yeah, it,
initialize the data, but like create instance, like how is it being
yeah. So it
managed?
doesn't get. So that's the thing. It doesn't set up any data. So it just creates the instance, and now you have to fill it up. So so if you build your list of widgets, those widgets gets created, and you can be sure that they now have their view model assigned to them as well, but you still have to access that view model and put something in there.
I think the
So
nice, the nice, yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, sorry, that's
So,
interrupting.
no
Okay,
problem.
but I had a thought there though,
Yeah,
how they differ in a good way. It's like manual allows you to set it how you want. It doesn't necessarily determine that you're creating it. It might be created by some manager, which has an
yeah.
array of a bunch of things, and then you're manually going and getting that from a list, maybe. Whereas create instance is inferring that like this particular widget is going to have its own instance, not managed or held in any upper layer. Um, Whereas manual allows you to do either or, right? Like you could create it in the widget, or you could have created it in a parent of some kind or in a subsystem, and you're
Hmm.
getting it manually. I like, yeah, create instance makes a lot of sense. I guess then from construct you would be able to just immediately get that VM and initialize as needed.
Yeah, yeah, it should be there after that. By the way, and this may be obvious to some, but I just want to mention that in pre-construct you cannot access your VMs there,
Yeah,
because you shouldn't access any game code in pre-construct, so your VMs will not be available there. So if you try to do anything with them in pre-construct, you will get some errors that may not be too obvious. So just wanted to
yeah,
throw the tip out there. In construct they will be available and you can access them.
makes sense. Yeah,
Um, so global view model collection, you already mentioned that. So that one's pretty simple. You have well, simple in concept is that there's a global subsystem in Unreal that holds these view models that are accessible from anywhere. Somebody needs to put them into that collection, some part of game code, and then you can just access them through specifying the class and a tag, like as a context, and that's seems pretty useful for things like that are global, like let's say local player related stats. Seems like a very good fit for that. But I haven't actually, I used it at first, and then I found it kind of clunky the way it's used. And so there's nothing wrong with it really. It's just, you just have to, the code, you have to get the subsystem, put the item in there when you update it, and then the other part is of course you need to type the tag exactly. So you need to remember to know the
yes,
identifier. So of
string-based
course,
issues. Yeah,
yeah. So if that changes in one place and not here, at best you'll get an error, and at worst you won't notice it. And that sounds so. That's just kind of the issue. It's not wrong to use it. It's just I found myself using it less because I tend to use the resolvers more. I'll just mention the property path first, because it's in the list. So property path is the same thing. It's a string based, so you can be like, and this is always in relation to the widget, so you don't need to type self, but it's like if there was a variable named player controller on the widget, player controller dot current character dot stats view model. So
path. I've never
it's an
heard of it.
interest. Yeah, so and the function should work as well if like get player controller, get something if they're pure functions. So that's kind of the idea here. I haven't used this at all, because I think it's a little brittle. Like, you have to know the property names exactly. It's the
Yeah.
same thing if they change for any reason. It's good if they're stable and they don't change, but if they change,
What does the
it
drop
gets a
down
little
give you?
messy. What's what?
What does the drop down give? Does the drop down let you do it through search? No, it doesn't do anything.
No, nothing in this case. I don't know if I need to compile this first, or we could actually
Or
try
have like a variable maybe of character
yeah.
that you could
Let me
access, and then maybe it lets you step through. At
yeah,
which
I can
point it
reset this.
becomes at least a little bit easier to set up. But
Yeah.
yeah, for global,
So let's just
if you're
grab
gonna
a new one
have
there.
name based, what I feel about global is it should have been done with gameplay tags because they're far less likely to be like
Yeah.
misspelled, right? Because you're picking it from a list of collections that you've tagged, like you've just tagged them, and now you can have well organized global collections.
Yeah.
Um, at which point there's a bit of me that wonders whether like if I'm going to make VMs, maybe I just give them a tag, and then I have a system that is going to get them for me, so I don't even need to worry. Like
Yeah, it's
if I
certainly good.
have,
Yeah.
say I have VM game state. If I ever put VM game state on a widget, it knows what to look for through virtue of some connection that I've made somewhere else as data. But yeah, how's this looking?
and so yeah, on that, like, yeah, it would be really good if that use tags in there, because then it would have been less error prone.
Yeah.
So that's a suggestion for Epic if they're listening. Yeah, the property path. If I make a new model and compile the blueprint, then I can use the drop down to pick properties. So
It's very similar to state tree.
yeah, it's and then it writes it out. But
Not too bad.
again,
Not
like
too bad.
I haven't used this myself. I tried it a couple times and I was like, I don't really like it that much. I'm not saying
It's
it's wrong. I'm
yeah.
just not using it myself because of the perceived clunkiness of it. And that's because I use resolvers a lot. So resolvers seem like the most complex style at first, I think, because you pick a resolver and then you need a class for that.
Yeah.
But actually, don't sleep on these. These are actually like pretty nice and easy to use, and you can use. So I'm finding myself using manual and resolver the most, I would say. And resolver lets you basically do, well, I mean, it lets you do put the logic where that thing comes from into a little piece of blueprint code. If I don't know if you showed did you go through resolvers at all? I can
I
show
actually
a real.
I actually tried to do it, and and I tried to get game state from it, but it's like some sort of level of object that can't get certain globals or statics or whatever we call them, and so I ended up just being like, okay, I'm just going to do this a different way because the resolver isn't working for my particular use case. I can't remember exactly what it was, but yeah, it had that object based like limitations of like you couldn't call a blueprint function library from it, for example.
Yeah, because they're objects. So there's that. So there's definitely some, same thing with the VMs as well, because they're you objects. You can't use everything from there. Um, but so yes, so inside the resolver, so it's a little piece of code, a class that you make. You have a create instance function, and you have the user widget here. The requesting user widget. So then I can, like, for example, here, this is getting a player stats VM from a player stats component. So I have this resolver that grabs the player pawn, from the widget, gets a component from the, ignore my lack of, oh no, I do have a validity check here, sorry. I thought I didn't have a valid check there. So, I get the stats component from the character, and then from that stats component, I grab the VM itself and return that. Or in a similar way, the inventory, I get the player, get the component, grab the VM from there and return it. These don't have to be one-to-one. So it doesn't always have to be one VM means one resolver class, because you can have these return multiple types of classes. So you can set that your resolver supports, these two view model classes.
You got
And then
request
you
type
just have
there.
to, yeah,
Yeah.
and then you have to, using this expected type, you check like which one are we asking for. And for example, if you have multiple, so for example, I don't have it in this sample project, but like for example in Xfil, which is the game that we mentioned, and I've been using MVVM there as well in like a real shipping game. So not just some like spare time project.
Yeah.
Um, so
I'm
there,
showing it
for
right now.
example, I
It's on
I
screen.
have I have like a player controller VM resolver that can get a couple types of VM that are accessible through the player controller. So you can use one resolver for multiple use cases. So all I'm saying there is, like, this may seem like the most complicated one at first, but like don't it's
Seems
not
the
that
cleanest. It
that
seems very clean
yeah.
as
So
well.
and
Yeah.
like yeah. So again, we're accessing the game internals here, but it's not the UI that's doing it. So that still keeps the separation kind of
Yeah,
nice.
if you ever needed to
Um,
move that component somewhere else or rename it or whatever, you're just fixing like a class over here and not the endpoint still, which is great again. Actually,
yeah.
in comparison to the other four options, that one is the most decoupled,
And
which
here's because here's kind of the if you don't do a result, like here I have like thing where I don't have a property accessible, so I didn't have a resolver, didn't have any other way to access it yet. So I'm in the widget. I'm accessing the player, the pawn, getting a component, getting this VM stats object from there and putting it here. So and that's just because this character stats widget doesn't have a field to bind into, so I can't like assign that through a property path. So sometimes you might still end up putting like stuff like this in your code, and that's
Yeah.
fine. Do whatever you need to do, but I'm it's this is kind of the point of the system, is to move away from stuff like that if at best. But again, like to go back in it, like if you are doing like your you know first projects, and you're getting into this MVVM system, you don't need to sweat about doing every single thing right and proper, right? At start, like do what works. um
I had a
right.
question actually.
Yeah.
We got like 15 minutes left, maybe like 10, 15 minutes left. So,
Ooh.
how are you building the box inventory there on the right, like the actual
Okay, so yeah, so I could talk a little bit about the meat of this whole thing, which is the inventory. So okay, so I said about sweating about not doing things perfect and proper. Inventory, however, is something where I was definitely thinking a little bit like what's a good way to do it, because you can have a lot of data in there. You might have 1,000 items in your world or something like that. You have player inventory with slots. You have the container inventory, and so on and so on.
yeah.
So okay, so most of my so there was an looking at the view models list. So I have a few, and because this example is mostly centered around the inventory, most of these are inventory related. So I have a few inventory related view models here. There is one that is called VM inventory, and this then has a couple maps for slots. Slots themselves are view models as well. And then I have one VM here reference, because you can nest view models inside the view models. So we have this inventory VM as a root. It has another VM called container items. So the container items that you asked about then has a name as a field, which said like test box in the test. Um, and then it has a list of array of VM inventory item types, VM inventory items. And then a VM inventory item is the most, well, not the complicated one, but that's the most field in this. Like this is the representation of a single item in the invent that you
Yeah, it's
see on the
classic.
screen. So it has your name and image, and bunch of other stuff. So the container VM needs to get those items added. So we add them here, to a function. Actually, let's not go there yet. Let's go into the inventory component, because the inventory component does that. Um, so so I have this function. So like when a player goes and inspects the box in the world, this gets called. I pass them. I made like a interface to be like an inventory source, but it could just be the actor. Um, and so I get the inventory that the container has, because the container also has its inventory. The
Yeah,
container inventory is much simpler. In my plugin, it's just like a list of things in
yeah,
no particular order. So I get the inventory of that, and skipping ahead, I bind one delegate, because if if someone else modifies that box, for example, it's a multiplayer game. So if someone else takes an item from there, and this is all replicated, so I need to get some sort of notify that
yeah.
it has been updated while
It's
this
like
is
on
open.
rep for the data, then
Exactly, yeah.
fire off a delegate, update everyone. Yeah,
So we construct the VM container items. When we inspect it, that's the root of the container. Set the set the name as the property, and this, by the way, could have been a construct spawn construct parameter as well. So we set the name, then we get the items. That's the inventory component in my system, and then I get all of the items from there, and then I do create view model for item instance, add them to that array, and then I set the array once.
yeah, yeah. Very similar to there's that epic one that we mentioned earlier that I did, where it's like populate slots, I think it was called, or yeah, and then they would do the same sort of like for
Yeah,
loop through the data asset and the information that's in here. In this case, you're getting it from the source of inventory
yeah. So
on the
it's
container.
like
Yeah,
like this inventory item instance, and then building those item view models itself. Um, like I said, that's the one with the most fields. So I have this function, utility function that fills makes an inventory item view model, fills the basic things from the item data asset,
yeah,
description, weight, and then a bunch of I did some like ammo and maximum ammo and stuff like that, condition, durability, for the item, stuff like that. So this is the kind of stuff that can get more complicated as well, but right now it's pretty simple. But to go back into the container a little bit, um, so where was I? Help!
I like
There we are.
Has condition is a bool. It is a condition. It
Yeah,
itself is a
yeah,
condition.
yeah, yeah. I did that. I wanted like explicit checkbox because some items don't have that.
Yeah,
This
so
one, by the way, is
hide
oh
this entirely. Yeah, instead of making a
yeah,
conversion function that's like the durability is -1, so
yeah,
therefore,
exactly, yeah.
yeah, it's
But
more
that's
explicit.
definitely like something that you can also do like. Um, so the container stuff. So we set it once because this is an array, and you cannot when you have an array property as a field notify inside your view model. You cannot, if you add or remove a single item, that's not going to trigger
On
any kind of
ramps, I
broadcast.
guess.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly. So
broadcast. Yeah,
if I were to add, and that example actually comes because I mentioned this when the
yeah,
inventory is updated. Well, what do we do? Okay, so we say that because this is only built once when you open the container, and after that, while this you know um, UI is open, we don't rebuild the container view model. We are if we drag an item from there or add an item into there, it triggers individual update calls. And for that purpose, we will on. So let's just go there. So okay, so here we know that something changed the container. We did a little check to see if it was removed or added. Um, so we need to, let's say that something was removed from there. So we call remove item instance, and this, by the way, this code is in the view model itself. So you definitely can and should put all kinds of utility helpers in your view models, like take advantage of the fact that you can define functions here, so you
yeah.
don't need to just keep the data in there. um, it keeping in mind the limitation that, for example, you cannot call utility functions here because there is no world context on this, it's just an object. um, but anyway, so we had an array of inventory item view models, and we can remove the item that was removed from there, remove that, and then we need to broadcast that the property changed. So after removing something from an array or adding to it individually, you call this broadcast field value changed,
Yeah.
items changed, and then our container items gets this update items notify, and it rebuilds the list.
That's a lot
So
clearer as well with the node than just calling like set self as self, which some
yes,
programmers would look at and be like, "Why are you setting self as self?" And it's like, because the broadcast, man. It's like, yeah, okay, the
yeah.
node actually tells you explicitly why, and otherwise comments are your friend.
I and then I also I, and they also implement sorting on that UI. This, by the way, is purely on the VM side. So because this doesn't, when I sort the items in the container, user clicks the sort button. Um, it only sorts the visible items. It doesn't actually change the inventory at all. Because it doesn't need to. It's purely a player side thing. So I actually only sorting the view models. So that was an interesting thing as well. Is where this one does not touch the inventory data at all. It only puts the view models into a different order and then updates the item so the UI changes. So
That's cool. Yeah.
pretty easy to do it that way. arrays, I will say that, like I said, that's this is kind of the limitation. Is like you cannot say there is no built-in support for like a fast removal of like or addition of like a single item in those bindings. So let's say that if you
There's
had
no fast array in Blueprint, right?
and so if that could be a problem if you had, you know, I don't
Hundreds.
know,
Yeah.
hundreds of items, which
I was
isn't impossible in a,
Yeah.
inventory-based game, right?
I was gonna ask because like I've been thinking about that recently, and like I'm pretty sure I'm gonna need to do this in C++ for like little demos of inventories myself, and then um, yeah, I update one element in the middle of the array. I don't want to have to unwrap that whole array again. Um, and I don't understand fast arrays or C++ very much, so it's not in my wheelhouse. So I'm like, how would I deal with that? And um, yeah,
Good
what was
question.
your approach there? Yeah.
On
Just
the networking side, you mean?
max items 20 basically in a container.
Oh, no, no. So when it comes to the UI side, like I said, this is just doing the simple thing where it recreates that list every time. So I'm not
Mm.
bothered about it in this case. If I had to refresh a single view model in there, oh, by the way, if a single item changes, then that's going to get updated automatically. If if like a value on an item changed, that's already bound. But if I removed, I had the 2000 items in there and a single one gets removed from the middle, then I would be a little bit more concerned in like, is the UI update going to be, creating and
No,
destroying widgets?
if you're
Is
using that list view or the grid view, whatever it's going to be for the pool, like the native pooling,
mm,
and it's then all object driven. What a list view object, which is a blueprint interface that you or an interface that you can put onto a widget to define it as a user list entry, that then derives itself from object data. That object data can be the VM, right, that
mm,
represents the item. And so now you're saying, give me a list of items. These are the VMs. The VMs are representative of the set that the list view represents. And then if it creates, and I mean, I'd still avoid drawing like more than 100 widgets if I could, but like because it's object driven and it's pooled, it's like as you go down through the list, you could have 2000 items, but it will come back to the top. I'm not sure if entry box does that. I haven't actually seen that before as an element, but I know that
mm.
list views do it.
Yeah. So the dynamic entry box is you specify a widget class
Hmm.
for your entries, and then you just create those entries and it's going to make sub widgets of this class. I don't know if this does any fancy caching in there
Right.
for the
Yeah.
pooling for those widgets, but still if you remove one item from, at least the way this one is built, because um, in the case of like it would be good if this supported it out of the box, like the in between removal. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't think I can just bind the list of VMs as the source of um, data source of this thing. But that definitely is something that like would be useful for this case.
Yeah.
If you have to deal with this kind of problem, then in this case, again, if I had lots of items, then I would do this a bit differently, where I send like a item removed notifier from somewhere and then only remove that one single item. But that's kind of the limitation um, of the view model stuff in that case, is that like when you send a field notify, it has to have a value associated with it, right? So you can't just be like a thing changed, right?
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So that's the, but I'm not too bothered about this part until I have tons and tons of items here. So it's again something that like not a big deal yet. However, you talked about the inventory code and fast arrays and things like that. There, I've definitely like I made sure that like that's as efficient as possible. So because it's all networked, and I
Yeah.
and I want that to be kind of like a good foundation for games.
Yeah.
So there, I use fast array serializer to be able to like efficiently add, remove, and modify item
Yeah.
instances from the list. So
That is a
is there any?
conversation for another time because it's all C++
Yeah, we can
land.
probably go over it and like
Yeah, yeah,
I'm probably
sometime.
gonna make that plugin available on GitHub once I'm done with it. Just so
That'd
that
be
others
awesome.
can use
Yeah,
it
yeah.
as well.
Yeah, we
Because
can host that as well. We can like host your
it's all
link.
replicated networked here.
Yeah, yeah. No,
Phew.
I love sharing the resources around. That's super cool.
Yeah, and I definitely sharing anything that I can share.
I think there's
Any other?
so few MVVM resources that kind of thing is like also what I'm wanting to do. I want to build a UI and just share out those resources. Um, so yeah, it's super cool. Nothing else I
Yeah,
have on question wise though.
yeah. So I guess I can. Let me just refresh that because I broke it while we were testing some things. So MVVM in general, in Unreal sense, in the Unreal plugin. So I would say that like as of 5.5, it's usable in production. Um, Before that, I would be a little wary because there are still bugs even in the current version, but nothing that's been breaking or blocking me from doing this. So I think it's okay to use in a ship game now. I'm sure they've fixed some things in 5.6 and 5.7. I'm still on 5.5 here.
Yeah,
Um, but I would consider it a ready to use thing. There are some things that don't work. I can or I don't seem to be able to make work at least in 5.5. So if we have a minute, do you want me to talk about
yeah,
that, or are we
yeah, yeah.
over time? Because
No,
I can definitely go.
we can always go for a little bit. Yeah.
So, okay. So I just wanted to mention in the bindings, you have this condition feature. Which did you use this at all?
Not
Did this
yet.
come
No,
across?
no, not
Yeah.
yet.
So, and there is no documentation on this, at least that I can find. So condition, it seems to be a you know, fairly simple thing. If value called condition, but that's perfect. So if the um, durability of my item was more than half, then set the condition display bar red, for example. So it seems like it would be used for things like that.
I actually have used this
However,
now that you've shown me it. I used
yeah,
it to hack around playing an intro animation on a UEFN widget. So in UEFN, there wasn't like an event for on construct that because you can't open the graph, so you can't just play an animation. But I wanted to play an animation the moment that this widget got drawn, and I
yeah,
could create an animation in the designer. I just couldn't call it. So what I did was on this widget, when the padding of this element that I know is never equal to zero is not equal to zero, and it immediately would fire and then trigger the animation. So it worked in UEFN, and so I wonder, yeah, where did you get to with it? Yeah,
so this is kind of my understanding. It's like you do stuff like this, um, do like conditional um, property bindings there. However, it watch it just work here. It doesn't work. So it's supposed to change the tooltip based on condition. But when I was looking at it, it seems a little. So this is possible. Maybe it works in 5.6. In 5.5, it doesn't work for me. So when I actually look at the code that it creates, because you can, by the way,
oh
you can
yeah,
do that. So there's this little thingy here that you can press and do like show event graph. When I
yeah.
look at it, very nice layout. This isn't hooked up. This does nothing. So of
The
course it
true
does. So
false. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know how this is meant to be used.
Ah,
So it
yeah. So
seems,
if you go back to your VM,
yeah.
and then in that tooltip there,
Mhm.
where you've got tooltip text, if you do a bind, so there's a little binding button on the right there. You see
Yeah.
it's like a hook link, sorry, like a chain link next to your the item is a good condition. You
Yeah.
can make a pure function there that has possibly the true false outputs. I think basically what's missing in your after your when and your thing underneath, it needs to have like a signature for true false, possibly. I think that's what I recall. Um,
Maybe you're thinking of the
but it might
conversion
take
functions in
yeah, like
there.
like a conversion function that has a true false potential or something like that is coming to mind. I do have my UFM project where I made this work. Um, and
Yes,
like you
I'm
say,
I'm just wondering if it is an just a version thing,
yeah,
where
version thing, yeah.
where it might work. But I didn't
Because
really
it
get.
should come out with a true false, right? Like,
Yeah, exactly.
and then you do whatever you want to do after that.
Yeah. Um,
Interesting.
so it seems a little half baked, and then of course this only does floats. So you can't, you can pick a boolean as your thing to compare, but these are always going to be the same options. So it's always these,
Yeah,
value comparisons from using floating
from a
point
float.
values. So
Mm,
so it
yeah,
seems a little half baked
yeah,
as a
yeah.
thing.
Work
So
in
I'm not sure
progress.
what.
Yeah,
So I'm not
because you'd
sure.
want a
So this is
when string is
yeah.
not equal to string, maybe string comparisons. Yay, we all love those.
Yeah, or yeah, or Boolean that hey, is this thing checked? If you yes, then do this. But I've just worked around. I haven't needed this, so I
Yeah,
can just bind into a Boolean property and do the thing based on that. Like
yeah,
here,
normal.
for
Yeah,
example, if it
yeah,
has
yeah.
condition, do these things, and so on. So that's something that I seems a little unfinished. And sometimes, if you change the widget layout, move things around, there is a chance that your and compile. There's a chance that your editor will now start throwing an error that's like cannot set view model, cannot generate set view model.
Right, I've seen that.
And
Yeah, I have seen that.
if that happens, just restart your editor. It's fine. It's gonna go away. So there's just like a confused state that it gets. Um,
Serialized
that's an
somehow.
annoyance. Yeah, and it hasn't broken any data for me. So that's what I'm saying is like just if that happens, just restart your editor. It'll be fine. Um, so
Appreciate little
that's
bits
that's
of
something that I
tidbits.
yeah. Um, and then let's see, did I have something else in? Otherwise, like I do think it's a pretty simple system overall. Again, this wasn't really a tutorials, and you've done the basic streams on this, so um, so this may be like a lot of stuff at once. But like my thing is that it is a pretty simple system, so this is suitable to learn. If you have enough UMG knowledge, like by all
Mm,
means dive into this, and it seems good to use. Like I said, I've used in a shipping game with no real issues there,
yep.
and I'm sure it'll get better. Another thing, though, that I'll mention just as a tidbit is: did you use soft images, soft textures in your?
Yeah, yeah. I had to make conversion functions to apply them to the brush, if I
Yes,
remember.
same thing here, and that seems like a straight up bug because there's supposed to be a built-in conversion function here. It even comes. I've even checked the engine code; it's there, but it doesn't work. And if I remember right, it even comes up in the log. I may have gone away. It's sometimes popped up here as like a warning that that function is something is wrong with it. So
So
it
soon we'll be
seems,
able to just go straight soft texture
yeah,
to image. Thank
yeah.
you.
So
Yeah,
it looks like, and funnily enough, I can find them show that example in the UEFN documentation.
yeah,
So
yeah,
clearly it works somewhere, but I just wanted to mention because this is a super common thing that you would do. You would put a soft texture as a property, right?
yeah,
So far you may have to write a little wrapper that is just like, hey, load that. But
yeah.
that's
I had a
that's about it.
project. I did have a project where I think I got that working. I'll have to. I'll ping you later if I open my project this evening after work, and I'll take a look at what I did because I drew basically an inventory of fishes, different fish
Hmm.
icons from
Yeah,
data, and
yeah,
either I hit that blocker and made that VM function to convert the soft texture in, and just put it into the brush as a function, or I found out what it expected me to do, and so yeah, I'll let you know later if I find out what that
yeah.
is, and then I'll
Because that was one of those annoyances that I'm like, that would
yeah.
be nice to fix.
This is looking great, and yeah, I appreciate you showing us through it. And I saw Yod Todd Yodson earlier,
The
which was
default name is
yeah,
dot son is
Todd
the
Todd Todd.
placeholder. Yeah, no, I have
Yeah,
this.
it's
If
a good one.
if by the way, if any of the viewers have seen the kind of the meme of the the um like the names in that some old retro game with like all these like fake
Cannon
American
fodder,
names, yeah,
cannon
that's
fodder
where this
style.
list comes from. By the way, for those last names, so
Oh,
the
nice.
Todd Mac Daikel and whatever it was in that meme. So it's one old NES game. So where they had like fake names
Yeah.
for all the baseball players. So oh, that's your old man trivia for the day.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hopefully this was informative. And
Yeah.
yeah,
No.
if
It's like we said. There isn't much information out there from just like base level developers like building with it. There's these great resources that are out there that we link in the video. Sometimes I'll make sure to update the description with them. Straight from Epic, right? That are like showing you these things. But like when you get into like nesty systems and you're actually like doing a lot more than you can do in a short talk, like super valuable stuff to have shared out somewhere. So I really appreciate you spending the time to to whip that up and polish it out for the talk here. It was really cool.
yeah, cool. All right. If
Yeah.
that is it, then from
Yeah, man.
myself,
All right.
have a great day.
Looking forward to see what Xfield's got next.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if I want to do a little promo, we're doing a demo weekend this weekend, so
Yeah.
Exfil is freely fully playable, multiplayer and all, this weekend. So download it and have a go if you want to check out a like a milsim extraction shooter type game.
Yeah, yeah. I used to work on that as well. Super excited. Love all the new helicopters and the new maps and stuff that'll come out. So, yeah, congrats on getting that game out. Super cool stuff. All right,
All right,
I'll catch you next time. Thanks, man.
peace.
Peace. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back for another unskippable podcast in the future. Uh, Up for taking recommendations on topics that you'd want us to cover and find people to talk about over these complex topics or working systems, examples, sort of just going through different patterns, different ways of doing things, and different problems that we might come across, tidbits that you might be able to take away. Yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.